Prince William did not need a shouting match to send a message. He only needed a signature, a title, and one quiet decision. When Queen Elizabeth died, the public saw grief, black coats, long processions, and royal tradition moving on schedule. What many people did not see was the transfer of real power happening underneath all that ceremony. Not gossip, not palace fantasy, real power, real land, real money, and real control. With his father becoming King Charles III, William automatically became Duke of Cornwall and took charge of the Duchy of Cornwall, a vast estate worth more than $1 billion, spread across more than 128,000 acres. That was not a symbolic ribbon cutting. That was leverage. Today we are diving into a royal story that is less about crowns and more about control. Because once William stepped into that role, the question was no longer whether he was preparing for kingship. The question was whether he had already started shaping the monarchy in his own image. And that is where Camilla enters this story. For years, Camilla was seen as the woman who slowly, carefully, and against all odds found her place inside the institution. First as the controversial outsider, then as Charles's study partner, then as queen. It took decades for that shift to happen. It was not easy, and it was not clean, but it happened. Publicly, the palace learned how to make that change look calm. Privately, many believed the scars never fully disappeared. Then, William inherited a machine of influence, not a hidden cottage, not a mystery castle, something much bigger. The Duchy of Cornwall is one of the most powerful private royal structures in Britain. It exists to provide income and independence to the heir to the throne. For years, Charles ran it. Then it passed to William the moment Charles became king. That meant William was no longer only the future. He now had his own base of authority, his own staff structure, and his own ability to make decisions that affected the shape of royal life. And one of those decisions got people talking. In 2024, reports revealed that William had chosen not to rehire Annabel Elliot, Camilla's sister, for design work connected to the Duchy of Cornwall. That detail mattered because Annabel had worked with Charles's estates for years after Charles married Camilla in 2005. According to reporting cited by People in the Telegraph, sources said it was not a criticism of her work and that the work was considered complete. Even so, the message was impossible to miss. William was under no obligation to keep Camilla's family circle embedded inside a system he now controlled. That is how palace shifts often happen, not with slammed doors, with expired access. Many are questioning how much that one move actually meant. Was it a normal management decision? Was it simply a contract ending at the right time? Or was it William drawing a line very politely around the future he wants? Because in royal life, small admin choices can carry the weight of public declarations. What makes this story hit harder is the history behind it. William is not just any senior royal dealing with a difficult family structure. He is Diana's son. He is also the man expected to carry the monarchy into a new age. So when people watch how he moves around Camilla, they are not only reading the present, they are reading old pain into new decisions. And the palace knows that. There is another layer here too. Queen Elizabeth and William were known to share a warm relationship, and the official transfer of rank after her death placed him in a much stronger position inside the institution. At the same time, stories about the Queen's early dislike of Charles and Camilla's relationship have never fully disappeared from royal coverage. One widely circulated example came from a Tom Bower biography, later covered by People, which said the Queen once referred to Camilla as that wicked woman. That claim comes from a book account, not from an official palace record, but it remains part of the mythology surrounding the long, complicated road to Camilla's acceptance. So, now imagine the tension. A future king with his own power base, a queen whose place took years to secure, a monarchy trying to look united while every gesture gets decoded. This is where the story stops being about family discomfort and starts becoming a story about succession. Because what many people do not know is that royal battles are rarely loud at first. They begin in silence, in staffing changes, in property questions, in who is invited in and who is slowly moved to the edge. And if that is what we are seeing here, then this was not just one contract ending. It was a warning sign. To understand why this story feels so charged, you have to go back long before William held any real institutional power. You have to go back to Diana. For a lot of people, that is where every conversation about William and Camilla begins, even when no one says it out loud. Camilla was never just a new royal wife entering an old family. She arrived carrying decades of scandal, memory, and public anger. Her relationship with Charles had been one of the most talked about royal controversies of the modern era. The collapse of Charles and Diana's marriage, the media storm around the affair, and the grief that followed Diana's death created a shadow that never fully left. Even when public opinion softened, it never vanished. William grew up inside that storm. That matters. Because royal children do not experience scandal like ordinary children. They live in it. Then they read it. Then they watch the world reduce their family pain into headlines. By the time William was old enough to understand what had happened, the damage was already part of history. So when commentators talk about his relationship with Camilla, they are not inventing tension from nowhere. They are reading years of emotional and symbolic baggage into the present. Whether he is polite, distant, strategic, or simply careful, every move is judged through that lens. Accounts from journalists and insiders reveal that Camilla's path into acceptance was gradual, managed, and extremely deliberate. Early resistance inside royal circles was real. Later acceptance was also real. By the time Charles and Camilla married in 2005, the palace had started the long process of normalization. The Queen eventually appeared to soften publicly, but the road there was not smooth. A famous claim from biographer Tom Bower, later covered in mainstream royal reporting, described the Queen's anger in earlier years. Again, that is a biographical claim, not an official statement, but it helps explain why this story still carries so much emotional heat. Then came another shift. Elizabeth aged. Charles moved closer to the throne. William moved closer too. And when William became Prince of Wales and Duke of Cornwall after the Queen's death, it changed his position overnight. The official royal website makes clear that he became Duke of Cornwall immediately upon Charles's accession. That role is not decorative. It connects him to land, income, administration, and a historic structure built to support the heir. This is why the quiet power idea matters so much. Before that point, William could influence. After that point, William could decide. That is a huge difference. Royal insiders often talk about the monarchy like a family, but it is also a system. And systems are shaped by budgets, estates, titles, staff, schedules, and access. Once William held the duchy, he was not waiting outside the room anymore. He had his own room. Then the pattern started to show. One of the clearest public examples was Annabel Elliot. She is not a random name in this story. She is Camilla's sister, an interior designer, and for years she had design work linked to the Duchy of Cornwall under Charles. Reporting later showed that William chose not to continue that arrangement in the duchy's 2023-2024 year. Sources stressed that it was no reflection on her work and said the work was considered complete. But people noticed anyway, because this was one of the first visible signs that William intended to reset the machinery around him. That is how a pattern emerges in royal watching, not from one explosive act, from one act that suddenly makes older tensions look important. And Camilla had her own world too. For all the grandeur attached to her public role, reporting has repeatedly shown that Mill House matters deeply to her on a personal level. The Telegraph described Mill as the Wiltshire home she retained so she could spend time with her children and grandchildren away from the trappings of royal life. That detail is revealing because it shows that even after becoming queen, Camilla kept a private center of gravity outside the main royal stage. That private refuge says a lot. It suggests she always understood that royal life is conditional. Titles rise, public moods change, households shift, and maybe that is why stories about her future place under a future King William keep returning. People look at William's modernizing image, his tighter style, his emphasis on streamlined roles, and they wonder whether Camilla's influence will remain the same in the next reign. There is no official answer to that. But the question survives because the structure is already changing around them. The warning signs were never going to come with sirens. They came through body language, staffing choices, and the basic reality that William's generation is not the same as Charles's generation. Charles spent decades managing a complicated emotional and public case for Camilla. William may spend his reign managing the institution after that case has already been won. That creates a strange tension. Camilla's acceptance was hard-earned, but William did not build his public image around defending that story. He built it around the future. And then came the moment that made all of this feel less theoretical. Because once William had authority, people stopped asking whether he could shape the monarchy. They started asking how far he would go. On this particular occasion, the crisis did not arrive with one single palace announcement. It arrived through accumulation, a title here, a staffing decision there, a string of reports, and then the feeling that the balance inside the royal household was changing, quietly but fast. For years, William had been watched as the future, but after becoming Duke of Cornwall, he was no longer just being prepared. He was acting inside one of the most powerful royal structures available to the heir. The Duchy of Cornwall, with its land, income, and history, did not just strengthen him financially. It strengthened him symbolically. It said to the palace, to staff, and to the public that he had entered a new phase, and that changed the emotional temperature of everything around Camilla. Because once power becomes real, old tensions feel more dangerous. The reports about Annabel Elliot landed in that exact atmosphere. Publicly, the explanation was simple enough. William declined to rehire her for duchy work. Sources told the Telegraph, later cited by People, that the decision was not a personal insult and that her work had effectively ended. But in palace terms, that was still a moment. Annabel had long represented a point where Camilla's family circle touched Charles's working world. William's decision showed he was willing to redraw that line. That is what made people freeze, because it looked less like chaos and more like intent. And intent is harder to dismiss. Many are questioning how Camilla herself reads that kind of move. No public fight followed. No blunt quote came out of the palace. But silence can be its own kind of reaction. In royal life, open conflict is often avoided precisely because everyone understands what is being said without anyone saying it. There is a gossip version of this story and a documentary version. The gossip version says William is drawing boundaries around Camilla before he even becomes king. The documentary version says a future monarch is consolidating his authority in a system he has just inherited. Both versions point to the same tension. Then there is the human side. Camilla is not some passing court figure. She is the wife of the king. She survived years of hostility to get to where she is. She learned how to function under scrutiny most people could not tolerate for a week. She also kept her own emotional fallback space in Raymill, where reporting says she spends time with her children and grandchildren away from royal performance. That detail suddenly matters more when people begin speculating about the future. Because a woman with a sanctuary is also a woman who understands exits. But there is more to this story. The full tension is not just about Camilla's comfort, it is about what William's choices say about the monarchy he wants to build. If he prefers a leaner institution, fewer blurred family loyalties, and a cleaner public chain of command, then decisions like the Annabelle one are not isolated. They are previews, and previews can be chilling. What happened next shocked everyone involved, not because the palace exploded, but because the pattern became easier to see. William's official position, his independent resources, and his willingness to make personnel choices created a picture that many royal watchers found hard to ignore. He looked like a man setting the house in order before the next chapter begins. That image is powerful, especially when placed against the long memory of Diana, especially when placed against Camilla's hard-won rise, especially when placed inside an institution obsessed with continuity. Then came the deeper question. If William is willing to reshape circles of influence now, what happens later? What happens when he is not just heir, but king? What happens to people whose standing depends less on formal rank and more on personal history with Charles? What happens to traditions that exist because Charles wanted them, not because William does? This is where the crisis becomes bigger than one relationship. It becomes a test of how modern succession really works inside the monarchy. Officially, everything is orderly. Titles transfer, duties continue, public smiles remain. But under that polished surface, power is moving from one emotional logic to another. Charles's monarchy made room for Camilla after years of resistance. William's monarchy may ask a different question entirely. What serves the institution now? And once that question takes over, sentiment has less room to breathe. The full truth was still to come. Because the deeper story was not whether William and Camilla were warm or cold with each other. The deeper story was that the monarchy had already entered the William era in miniature, and everyone inside it could feel the temperature change. Let's talk about what really happened. The most solid version of this story is not the wildest one. It is actually more revealing than that. Prince William did not need to seize a mystery estate from Camilla for this story to matter. The confirmed reality is already significant enough. After Queen Elizabeth II died and Charles became king, William automatically inherited the Duchy of Cornwall, a centuries-old estate designed to support the heir to the throne. That gave him more than prestige. It gave him independent authority, institutional footing, and a powerful role in shaping the future from inside, not from the sidelines. That is the real transfer of power. And once that happened, one of the first reported signs of William's style came through staffing. He did not continue Annabel Elliott's design role through the duchy. Again, reports stressed this was not framed as punishment, and sources said her work had simply run its course. But that explanation does not erase the symbolism. The heir who had just gained his own powerful estate was also choosing who would and would not remain connected to it. Accounts from journalists and insiders reveal why this landed so loudly. Camilla's position in royal life has always been both official and emotional. Officially, she is queen. Emotionally, she remains one of the most contested figures in the modern royal story. Her history with Charles, her place in the narrative of Diana, and the sheer length of time it took for her public image to stabilize mean that every future question around her feels larger than it would for almost anyone else. This is why people keep circling back to Ramil. Because Ramil represents something private, human, and separate from palace structure. Reporting in the Telegraph made clear that Camilla kept the Wiltshire home so she could spend time with her children and grandchildren away from royal life. That detail matters because it shows that even now, at the top of the institution, she still maintains a life not fully owned by the institution. And maybe that is the quiet truth underneath all the drama. Camilla has always needed a space that is hers. William is now building systems that are his. Those two realities can exist side by side, but they can also create distance. Public reaction to stories like this is always split. Some people see William as disciplined, modern, and focused on merit rather than inherited family networks. Others see coldness. Others still see unresolved pain from the Diana years shaping a future king's instincts. That is why every small move gets stretched into a giant moral test. It is never just about a contract, a house, or a title. It is about what kind of monarchy comes next. And those reactions matter because the monarchy survives on interpretation as much as ceremony. People do not only watch what royals do, they watch what it seems to mean. That is why old stories about the Queen's early disapproval of Camilla still echo, even when sourced through books rather than official statements. They help feed the larger idea that Camilla's place, though secured publicly, was never simple. A widely discussed claim from Tom Bower's biography said the late Queen once called Camilla that wicked woman. Whether people believe every word of that account or not, the fact that it remains part of the conversation tells you everything about how unstable this history has always felt beneath the polished surface. So what changed? Not everything, but enough. William now has both legitimacy and reach. He is the heir, the Prince of Wales, and the Duke of Cornwall. He supports the king publicly, but he also runs a structure of his own. That means future choices will not feel accidental, they will feel like architecture. Camilla, meanwhile, remains protected by her position as Charles's wife and by the status she now holds. But the future beyond Charles is where the uncertainty lives. Not official uncertainty, symbolic uncertainty, social uncertainty, emotional uncertainty, the kind that fuels documentaries, gossip columns, and palace speculation because no one can fully answer it until the moment arrives. Will William sideline her? Will he simply redefine the borders? Will the monarchy move into a colder, cleaner arrangement where everyone's role is smaller and more precise? Those are still open questions. But these stories provide insight into something deeper than one royal disagreement. They show how power really changes hands in old institutions, not always through public declarations, often through silence, structure, and the patient removal of assumptions. One generation builds its network. The next generation decides which parts stay, and that may be the most important line in this whole story. Because in the end, this is not only about William and Camilla. It is about what happens when private history meets public duty. It is about how old wounds survive inside polished systems, and it is about the moment a future king stops looking like the future and starts acting like the present. That moment has already begun.